In the heart of a bustling village, where traditions were law and the church bell marked time itself, a most peculiar sight stopped a joyous procession in its tracks. A stray dog, ragged and fierce-eyed, barred the bride's path, its growls reverberating through the air like an ominous warning. Whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. Was this an omen, or something far worse? If you're captivated by African stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to Afrotales TV for more gripping tales steeped in drama, intrigue, and unforgettable twists. The day had begun with unbridled joy. Bright sunlight poured over the village, gilding every surface with a golden glow. The church, an ancient structure of stone and stained glass, stood adorned with flowers and ribbons, prepared for the union of Kofi, the beloved son of the village elder, and Adwa, a woman of striking beauty who had captured hearts and raised eyebrows alike when she arrived in the village just months prior. Kofi stood at the altar, resplendent in his ceremonial robes, his face a portrait of pride and happiness. The villagers had gathered in full, their vibrant clothing a tapestry of colors against the serene backdrop of the churchyard. Children giggled in the pews, old men exchanged knowing glances, and the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and anticipation. As the church doors swung open, all eyes turned to Adwa. She appeared like a vision, her gown shimmering as if woven from moonlight, her veil trailing behind her like a river of dreams. Gasps of admiration rippled through the crowd as she stepped forward, each movement measured and graceful, her gaze fixed on Kofi with what seemed like unyielding devotion. But before she could reach the threshold, the dog appeared. It emerged from the shadows like a spectre, a wiry, unkempt creature with fur matted from her life on the streets. At first, it seemed like a harmless stray, drawn by the commotion. But when Adwa approached the church doors, the dog bared its teeth and let out a low, guttural growl that silenced the crowd. It stood firm, its stance defiant, its eyes locked on the bride as though it could see something no one else could. Gasps filled the air. Kofi's mother clutched her chest, murmuring prayers under her breath. The village elder frowned, his face clouded with concern. Dogs, after all, were revered in their culture as creatures of profound intuition, often believed to possess the ability to see beyond the veil of human understanding. "Shoo! Get away," hissed the groomsman, stepping forward to chase the creature away. But the dog did not budge. Instead, it barked, a deep, resonant sound that carried an air of accusation. Adwa hesitated, her hands trembling as she gripped her bouquet. For the first time that day, her serene composure wavered, and something akin to fear flickered in her eyes. Kofi, ever the gallant groom, left the altar to confront the commotion. "It's just a dog," he said, his voice firm but kind. "It means no harm." He knelt to coax the animal away, but the dog turned its gaze to him, whining softly, as if pleading. Then, it barked again, sharper this time, its eyes darting back to Adwa. The crowd murmured uneasily. "It's a sign," an elderly woman whispered. "The ancestors are trying to tell us something." Kofi glanced back at Adwa, whose face had grown pale beneath her veil. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. She nodded, but her lips were pressed tightly together, and her hand gripped her bouquet so hard that petals began to fall. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice was barely audible. Let's just continue." But the dog had other plans. It stepped closer to Adwa, its growls growing louder, its eyes unblinking. And then, with a sudden leap, it snapped at her hem, tearing a small piece of fabric from her gown. Adwa let out a startled cry and stumbled back. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Kofi rushed to her side, pulling her away from the dog. The groomsmen sprang into action, grabbing sticks and stones to drive the animal away. But even as it retreated, it let out a final, haunting bark, its gaze fixed on Adwa with an intensity that sent shivers down spines. The crowd was unsettled, the joyous mood shattered. Kofi turned to the elder for guidance, his face a mask of confusion and frustration. What should we do? The elder, wise and deliberate, stroked his beard as he observed the shaken bride. His voice was heavy with foreboding as he finally spoke. Perhaps, he said, the dog has seen something that we cannot. Perhaps this wedding must wait. The silence that followed was deafening. Adwa stood frozen, her hands trembling, her eyes darting between the dog and the villagers. And though she said nothing, her silence spoke volumes. The elder's words hung in the air like a thundercloud, casting a shadow over the once celebratory gathering. The dog's departure left an eerie stillness, but its actions had sown seeds of doubt and fear that would soon unravel truths far darker than anyone could have imagined. If this story has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe to Afrotales TV and journey with us as we uncover the secrets hidden behind this fateful day. Stay tuned for the next twist in this unforgettable tale. As the dog disappeared into the shadows, leaving only its haunting growls echoing in the churchyard, the mood had shifted irrevocably. The bride, once the picture of grace and elegance, now stood frozen, her hands trembling as if she held more than just a bouquet. The villagers, once united in celebration, now exchanged uneasy glances and hushed whispers. Could a stray animal truly unveil a secret too dangerous to ignore? Or was this simply a test of faith? The elder's words lingered like a fog over the gathering. Perhaps the dog has seen something we cannot. It was a statement heavy with implication, and though no one dared speak it aloud, a sense of foreboding crept through the crowd like a cold wind. Adwa's voice broke the silence, trembling but resolute. "It's just a dog," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A mere animal. Let us not let it ruin this day." Kofi, eager to shield her from further discomfort, nodded quickly. "She's right. We've waited too long for this moment to let superstition get in the way." He turned to the elder, his tone firm. "Let us continue." But the elder raised a hand, his expression unreadable. "Not yet. There are customs that must be observed when omens appear, even those as strange as this." The crowd buzzed with speculation. Women whispered to each other, some clutching their children closer. Men muttered about the wisdom of proceeding without heeding the elder's warning. The weight of tradition bore heavily on all present. "Customs." Adwa's voice quivered, though she tried to hide it. "Surely, elder, you don't believe this nonsense. It's a stray dog, nothing more." The elder's gaze bore into hers, unyielding. "Perhaps. But even the wind does not move without purpose. You may dismiss it as nonsense, but I must ensure there is no ill wind upon this union." He gestured to one of the groomsmen. "Fetch the seer. She will know what the ancestors say." Adwa stiffened, her knuckles white against the bouquet. "The seer," she repeated, her voice sharp enough to draw a few startled glances. "Is this necessary? Must we give in to every old superstition?" Kofi placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's just a precaution," he murmured. "Nothing more." But her reaction had already sparked whispers among the villagers. Why was she so resistant? What was she afraid of? The seer arrived moments later, a frail yet commanding figure draped in robes that shimmered like starlight. Her face, lined with age and wisdom, bore the expression of one who had seen too much of the world and yet understood its mysteries all too well. She carried a staff adorned with charms that clinked softly as she walked, each charm said to hold the blessings of the ancestors. She surveyed the crowd, her sharp eyes lingering on Adwa longer than was comfortable. "I have been summoned," she said, her voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the very air. "What is the matter that disturbs such a joyous day?" The elder stepped forward, explaining the strange events. As he spoke of the dog's defiance and its unnerving focus on the bride, the seer listened intently, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she nodded once. The ancestors often speak in ways we do not immediately understand. Sometimes through dreams, sometimes through creatures. It is not for us to dismiss their voice. She approached Adwoa, her gaze piercing. "You," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The one they call Adwoa. Step forward." Adwoa hesitated, her smile strained as she clutched Kofi's arm. "Surely this isn't necessary. Can't we?" "Step forward," the seer repeated, her tone broken no argument. Reluctantly, Adwoa stepped forward, her every movement stiff and deliberate, as though each step took immense effort. The seer studied her, circling her slowly like a predator assessing its prey. Then she stopped abruptly and leaned in close, her face mere inches from Adwoa's. "What have you brought with you, child?" she asked softly. Adwoa blinked, confused. "Brought with me? I don't understand." "Oh, but you do," the seer said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You carry something with you, a burden the ancestors do not approve of. Tell me, child, what is it that you hide?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Adwoa opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Her eyes darted to Kofi, whose brow furrowed in concern. "Adwoa," he said gently, "is something wrong?" "No," she snapped, startling everyone. Her face flushed as she composed herself. "No, nothing is wrong. This is absurd." But the seer remained unmoved, her gaze unwavering. "The ancestors do not warn us without cause. I suggest you think carefully before dismissing them." Adwoa's lips trembled, but she said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive, until the seer finally turned to the elder. "There is more here than meets the eye," she said solemnly. "Whether it will reveal itself now or later, I cannot say. But this union must not proceed without further guidance." The seer's words fell like a gavel, their weight impossible to ignore. The crowd, once unified in celebration, now found themselves divided, some believing in the dog's warning, others dismissing it as nonsense. Kofi's face was a mask of confusion, while Adwoa's was one of growing fear. What secret could the bride possibly be hiding? And why did the ancestors choose this moment to intervene? Stay with us as the story unfolds. Don't forget to subscribe to Afrotales TV for more unforgettable stories like this one. The silence that followed the seer's proclamation was almost unbearable. Villagers shifted uneasily, their earlier joy now replaced with suspicion and unease. Adwoa stood frozen, her face a mask of forced calm, but her trembling hands betrayed her. What was she hiding? And why did the ancestors, through the dog and the seer, demand this truth be revealed? The elder's voice cut through the tense air. "Adwoa," he said gently but firmly, "it is not just the ancestors that deserve the truth. If you carry a burden, it is Kofi and this community who must know it." All eyes turned to Adwoa, her figure shrinking under their collective gaze. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but before a word could escape, the seer raised her staff. The charms clinked softly, the sound unsettling in the heavy silence. "I sense fear," the seer said, her voice measured and deliberate. "Fear, not of the ancestors, but of what their truth will bring. Adwoa, if you do not speak, I will ask the ancestors to speak for you." Kofi stepped forward, his voice laced with concern. "Adwoa, if there's something troubling you, tell me. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Her eyes darted to him, wide and pleading, but she quickly looked away. "There's nothing to tell," she said, her voice barely audible. The seer's expression darkened. "You lie, child." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and damning. Adwoa's hands tightened around her bouquet, the petals now waiting under her grip. The seer closed her eyes and began to chant softly, her words incomprehensible to all but the elders of the village. As her voice rose, the air grew thick and oppressive, as though the ancestors themselves had entered the space. A sudden gust of wind swept through the churchyard, extinguishing candles and sending loose petals swirling into the air. The villagers murmured in alarm, clutching their children and each other. The seer's chant reached a crescendo before she fell silent, her eyes snapping open to fix Adwa with a piercing stare. "You brought darkness to this union," she said, her voice resonating with a power that silenced all protest. "A truth hidden deep within you, now laid bare by the ancestors." Adwa staggered back, her composure crumbling. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "This is madness. You're all being deceived, there's nothing to reveal." But the seer raised a hand, silencing her. "Enough. The ancestors have spoken. You will tell your truth, or I will reveal it for you." Adwa's lips trembled, and for a moment, it seemed as though she might speak. But before she could, an unexpected voice broke the tension. "She won't tell you because she's afraid of what you think." All heads turned to a man standing at the back of the crowd. He was dressed in plain clothes, his face weathered and his eyes sharp with accusation. His presence, like the dog's earlier, seemed to come from nowhere, yet it carried an air of undeniable authority. "Who are you?" Kofi demanded, stepping protectively in front of Adwa. The man smirked, his gaze never leaving the bride. "Someone who knows the truth about your beloved Adwa. Someone who knows why that dog wouldn't let her into the church." Kofi frowned, confusion and anger flickering across his face. "What are you talking about?" The man stepped closer, his voice carrying over the stunned crowd. "She's not who she says she is. Your bride has a past, a dangerous one. And she thought she could leave it behind by coming here." Adwa's face drained of color. "Stop," she cried, her voice breaking. "You don't know what you're talking about." But the man pressed on. "Oh, I know plenty. I know about the life you fled, the people you deceived, the ones who still search for you. Do you think you can outrun your past, Adwa? The ancestors know better, and now so does this village." The crowd erupted into chaos. Accusations flew, questions piled upon questions, and Kofi stood frozen, caught between defending the woman he loved and grappling with the possibility of betrayal. As the stranger's words ignited the crowd, Adwa's carefully constructed facade began to crack, revealing a darkness she had fought desperately to hide. But what was the full extent of her secret? And how far would she go to keep it buried? If you've been drawn into this mystery, remember to subscribe to Afro Tales TV for more gripping tales steeped in intrigue and suspense. As the stranger's words reverberated through the crowd, the air grew electric with tension. Adwa's serene demeanor had crumbled into panic, her trembling figure now the focus of every suspicious glance. What could she have done to draw the wrath of the ancestors, the determination of a stray dog, and the audacity of a mysterious man who claimed to know her secrets? The stranger took another step forward, his presence commanding as though he had every right to open the celebration. He pointed an accusing finger at Adwa. "You've spun lies, and now they're unraveling. It's time for the truth." Kofi, his face a storm of confusion and anger, moved protectively in front of Adwa. "I don't know who you are or what you think you know, but this is my wedding. I won't let you ruin it with baseless accusations." The man let out a bitter laugh. "Baseless? Ask her about Kofi answer." The name dropped like a stone into a pond, sending ripples of shock through the crowd. Gasps echoed as heads turned toward Adwa. She flinched as though struck, her lips parting in a silent denial. Kofi's voice was barely above a whisper. "Who is Kofi answer?" Adwa shook her head furiously. "It's nothing. He doesn't know what he's saying. He's trying to ruin us, please, don't listen to him." But the stranger wouldn't relent. "Kofi answer," he repeated, his stone sharp as a blade, was her husband. A man who trusted her, just like you do. And do you know what happened to him? He vanished. No one knows where he went, but Adwa here, she was the last to see him alive. The crowd erupted. Women covered their mouths in shock, and men muttered angrily under their breath. The elder raised his hand, calling for silence, his face grave. Is this true, Adwa? Tears streamed down Adwa's face as she fell to her knees, clutching at Kofi's robes. Please, you must believe me, she sobbed. It's not what he says, it's not true. Kofi pulled away, his face a mask of anguish. Tell me the truth, Adwa. Who are you? What happened to this man? I didn't kill him, she cried, her voice cracking with desperation. I swear on my life, I didn't kill him. But you knew him, the elder said, his voice calm but firm. You were married to him? Adwa hesitated, her silence damning. Finally, she nodded. Yes, she whispered. I was married to Kofi answer. The crowd exploded into chaos once more. People shouted questions, accusations, and prayers to the ancestors. Kofi stumbled back, shaking his head in disbelief. You lied to me, he murmured. You lied about everything. No. Adwa cried, reaching for him. Not everything. I love you, Kofi, I truly do. I didn't want to burden you with my past. I thought I could leave it behind and start fresh with you. But you left it behind by running, the stranger interjected coldly. And by leaving Kofi answer to whatever fate befell him. Tell them, Adwa, where is he? What happened to him? Adwa's sobs grew louder, her words coming out in broken fragments. He was cruel. He wasn't the man people thought he was. I tried to leave him, but he wouldn't let me. We argued, there was a fight. Her voice trailed off, and the crowd leaned in, holding their breath. The elder's voice cut through the tension. And then, Adwa shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know. He left that night and never came back. I swear, I don't know what happened to him. The stranger scoffed. Convenient. You fought, and he vanished. That's all you have to say? It's the truth. Adwa cried, her voice raw with emotion. I never saw him again. I was scared people would blame me. That's why I ran. But I didn't kill him. You have to believe me. The elder stroked his beard thoughtfully. Fear can drive people to do many things, he said. But the ancestors do not warn us without reason. There is more to this story. The seer, silent until now, stepped forward. The ancestors have seen what we cannot, she said, her voice heavy with meaning. They know what lies ahead if this union is allowed to proceed. The truth must be uncovered fully before any vows are exchanged. Kofi's voice was hoarse. Adwa, is there anything else? Anything else you've hidden from me? She looked at him, her eyes wide and pleading. No, she said, her voice trembling. I swear, there's nothing else. But the seer's gaze remained fixed on her, unblinking. We shall see, she said ominously. As the villagers struggled with the revelations, and Kofi faced the possibility that his bride's past might unravel his future, the air grew thick with anticipation. The ancestors' warning had shaken the community, but the full truth had yet to come to light. What would the seer uncover next? And would Kofi find the strength to face it? As the crowd waited with bated breath, the seer stood silently, her staff planted firmly in the ground as though anchoring the weight of the ancestors' judgment. Adwa's trembling form seemed smaller, her defiance now replaced by raw fear. Kofi's face bore the anguish of a man on the brink of losing everything he thought he knew. What truth lay beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed? If this story has you captivated, make sure to subscribe to Afro Tales TV for more suspenseful and emotionally charged tales that unravel the unexpected. The seer raised her staff, her voice low and commanding. The ancestors demand clarity. We will consult the spirits one final time. The crowd murmured uneasily as the seer began to chant, her words a rhythmic cadence that seemed to vibrate in the very earth. The air grew thick, and an unnatural stillness fell over the churchyard. Even the birds, moments earlier chirping in the trees, had gone silent. Adwa clutched her chest, her breathing shallow. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chant. "Please, no more." The seer ignored her, her chant rising in intensity. The charms on her staff clinked together, and a sudden gust of wind swept through the crowd, extinguishing the remaining candles and sending petals swirling into the air. Then, the seer stopped abruptly, her eyes snapping open. She turned to Adwa, her gaze sharp as a blade. "The ancestors have spoken. They revealed that the past has been hidden in shadow, but the truth cannot remain buried forever." Adwa shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, no, I told you everything. There's nothing more." The seer's voice was unrelenting. "You speak of fear, but the ancestors say you carry guilt. A guilt that weighs heavy upon your soul. It is time to confess." Adwa crumpled to the ground, her sobs echoing through the silent crowd. "I didn't mean to hurt him," she cried. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way." The crowd gasped. Kofi stepped forward, his voice trembling. "What do you mean? What did you do?" Adwa buried her face in her hands, her words choked with emotion. "It was an accident. He was drunk, and he wouldn't stop yelling. He grabbed me, and I pushed him. I didn't mean for him to fall, but he hit his head. There was so much blood. I panicked. I thought no one would believe me." The crowd erupted into chaos once more. Women wailed, and men shouted in anger. Kofi stumbled back, his face pale. "You killed him." Adwa looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. "I didn't mean to. It was self-defense. I was scared, Kofi. I didn't know what else to do. So I ran. I thought if I started over, I could leave it behind." "But you didn't leave it behind," the seer said coldly. "The ancestors saw your guilt, and they knew it would taint this union." Kofi shook his head, his hands trembling. "Adwa, I don't know what to say. I loved you. I trusted you. But this is too much." Adwa crawled toward him, her hands reaching out. "Please, Kofi. Don't leave me. I love you. I need you." The elder stepped forward, his voice grave. "Kofi, the decision is yours. But remember, the ancestors have intervened for a reason. To ignore their warning would be unwise." Kofi stared at Adwa, his heart torn between love and betrayal. The silence stretched as the crowd waited for his response. Finally, he spoke, his voice breaking. "Adwa, I can't marry you. I can't build a life with someone who kept something like this from me." Adwa let out a wail of despair, collapsing to the ground. Kofi turned away, his face a mask of pain. The elder placed a hand on his shoulder, guiding him back toward the church. The seer watched silently, her expression unreadable. As the crowd dispersed, their murmurs filled with shock and judgment, the churchyard was left in eerie quiet. The wedding was called off, and Adwa was taken into the elder's custody to await the village's judgment. The stray dog, as if satisfied that its mission was complete, was never seen again. The tale of the dog that stopped a wedding would be told for generations, a chilling reminder of the power of the ancestors to unearth hidden truths and the consequences of deception. But the ancestors' work is never done. Next market day, we bring you the story of her curves made her desired by all men, but only one knew her deadly secret. In a bustling town, a breathtakingly beautiful woman is sought after by every man who lays eyes on her. But the one man who wins her heart uncovers a life-threatening curse tied to her allure. Will love conquer fear, or will the curse destroy everything in its path? If you're ready for a tale of beauty, danger, and love's resilience, don't miss the next story. Subscribe to Afrotales TV today and join us as we unravel yet another unforgettable adventure. See you on the next market day.